Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bookmatic Best Book podcast. We have a great guest here, Elizabeth Sims. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be with you here today.
Yeah. So I recently read your book called You've Got a Book in You. And I was pleasantly pleased with this book because I know you have a history of authoring several books, typically in like what, the mystery or crime genre. Is that correct?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and so like I picked up this book on Audible and I was reading through it, and you got so many great tips for people who are striving to write their own book, whether it's a fiction book or a nonfiction book. And a lot of people that are viewing, thanks for showing the book there for people watching. A lot of people viewing and listening to this episode are readers of nonfiction books. So I think your book has a lot of valuable tips in it that can help people today. So we're going to go through some questions that will help hopefully give people insights into how to write their book that they've got inside of them. So can you tell us a little bit more about this book and maybe some of the other books that you've written in the past and some of your other experiences as well in the world of authoring and editing and things like that?
Okay, that's a whole big ball of wax there.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matt, it's great to be with you here. So yeah, okay, well, it's kind of funny. Certainly the business of publishing has changed, hugely since I was a young person thinking I'd like to get a book out there. I'd like to write. And I started as, when in college, I guess, writing for little magazines and stuff like that, doing, poetry and short stories and stuff like that. Okay, fine. And then I decided, well, I want to write a novel, and I did. And, short story, long story short, I did manage to find a publisher for it. And then I wrote another one, and that won an award. The first novel I published is called Holy Hell, and that is the first in the Lillian Bird crime series. It's a LGBTQ oriented series, and the second book in the series, Damn Straight, won a Lambda Literary Award, which is the top award in that kind of subculture, subgenre. Anyway, and they're crime novels. And then there's a total of 6 of those. I then wanted to reach a bigger audience, and I started writing books that were what you would call more mainstream crime and mystery. And I did get one published, and then wound up getting a 3-book hardcover deal with a major New York publisher. And those were the Rita Farmer mysteries, The Actress, The Extra, and On Location are the 3 titles there. In the midst of all that, around about the 4th book, I realized, the 4th book in the Lillian series, I thought, I keep like figuring out stuff that I think, well, I could share this with other writers, if I could do that, that would really be cool. And there was this magazine called Writer's Digest magazine, and it's
Mhm.
currently still the leading writing magazine, probably in the world. Anyway, it's published in the US. And I thought, well, maybe I could write an article or 2 for them. And so I got in touch with them and, sent in some ideas, and basically, and this is a little bit of a lesson for one trying to write to pitch to magazines. I wrote out a couple of ideas I developed them fairly well in this email. And then at the end I said, well, and if you're not interested in these, I've got these few other ideas. And I just one-lined a few other ideas. They got back to me saying, yeah, those 2 main ideas suck, but we really kind of like one of these little mini ones. Can you develop that a little bit for us? And that became the
Mhm.
first article I wrote for Writer's Digest. I continued to write for them and I've been their leading contributor over the
Mm.
years. I don't think anyone's contributed more. I think I have about 60 feature articles that I've done for them over the time since 2006, when I first appeared in them.
Oh yeah.
So I knew that I had a talent for helping other writers, and I thought, and so then what happens if you become an author, and people know that you're an author? They all say, hey, would you help me write my book? I have this idea for a book. Maybe you could help me write my book. And of course, like the lazy ones want you to write their book for them. But the ones that actually have a clue are like, maybe you could give me some advice and how to proceed, blah, blah, blah. or maybe you could read what I've written so far. And that gets old quickly. You're flattered at first because, people come to you, you're an expert. Okay, well, you can
Yeah.
help me. And so I started thinking, well, okay, let me look into the how to write books that are out there, because I want to be able to recommend. I can say, well, I can't exactly, like work with you for a week here, or, I can't really do this for you. However, try, I recommend you read this book to help you put your book together. And I started looking at the books that were out there, the biggest, best selling ones
Hmm.
on how to write, and I was like, and some of them were kind of like about getting in touch with the inner you, and others were like a little more technical and or process procedure, I don't know, oriented. And every one of them had good advice, but every one of them that I came across, and ones that are featured at the check stand at the bookstore because they sell so well, or featured at the check stand at the beauty shop because they sell so women want to write a book. All of them also said, well, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to write a book. I beg your pardon.
Hmm.
It's really hard to get a book out there. It's hard to get published, and then it's hard to get your book sold. And it's just so there's so much hard, difficult things, and there's a heartbreak waiting for you around every corner. And I'm like, God, screw that. I was like, if I had read one of these books before I tried to write a book, I would never would have written it. I would have gotten discouraged.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, well, how about if I write my own book on writing? So I did. I talked to
Hmm.
the publisher. I talked to my agent, who I had an agent at that point who was working with me selling my fiction. And so we kind of came up with some ideas, and I wrote this book, and she placed it with Writer's Digest books, which was not an automatic thing, because even though I wrote for the magazine and became a contributing editor by that point, and they knew me, there was still no automatic, golden key to get published, to get your book on writing published.
Hmm.
So she was helpful in that. And so then they said, yeah, wow, this is great. This looks great. We worked together, we went through the publishing process. And so you've got a book in you, a stress-free guide to writing the book of your dreams. That's the subtitle.
Yeah.
Got put out there. And so then I was able to say to people, hey, you want to write a book? Here's my book on how to do it. And what I wrote was not just some of the technicalities about writing properly, but how to just, how to feel that it's easy. The first sentence is writing a book is easy and fun. And most people, when I said that to an audience one time, just before the book came out, they burst out laughing. And I'm like, okay, this is I'm hitting the button here with people. You've got to make it fun. You've got to realize that it's a hell of a lot easier than you
Hmm.
might think. It's not that hard. And so my whole approach in You've Got a Book in You is to help people shut down that little inner, I call it the bitch or bastard that lives on your shoulder and tells you,
Hmm.
mean negative things. Shut down that person and get at your true creativity, and let your creative spirit flow. So that's what my book is all about.
Hmm. Nice. I love all the background story that you give here. Like this tells us that you really know what you're talking about, and in your book, you really do. I like that approach that, like the very first sentence, you set it out. You say writing a book should be or is easy and
Is
fun. Yeah,
and
not should be,
fun.
but is easy and fun.
Yeah,
And yeah, people get that idea in their mind that it's hard, and
yeah.
I think a lot of that probably comes from schooling and the
Exactly.
rigid structures and
Rules, yes.
rules and all that stuff. And I think that's some of the points in your book that you just say, like, sometimes you got to like throw those rules out the window, unless they're helpful,
Oh
then you can
yeah.
keep them, right? But
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to be able to write coherently, and even that's not that hard. So I talk
Mhm.
about how Well, you and I are speaking very coherently here. We're
Mhm.
not thinking that much about the next word or sentence that is coming out of our mouth. We're thinking, we're talking, we're interacting with each other. And if you can, and one of the things I say in my book is, if you can talk, you can write,
Mhm.
and you can tell a story. We've all told jokes, we've all told stories, I got into a car wreck on the way to the laundromat the other day. Anyway, I didn't, but people. But anyway, it was just it's on top of my head.
Yeah.
And what happened? And so you can do it and just write it down. You
Mhm.
get a story in your brain, and of course then structuring fiction is one thing, but I also talk about structuring nonfiction
Yeah. Yeah.
in my book, and how to get at that, and how to let that flow from within you.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually quite surprised because when I went into the book, I thought I was just going to be reading about writing fiction, but then I discovered that you have a good portion of the book that is very useful for nonfiction writers. So that's a big plus. So all these people who are writing books, a lot of them are struggling. So how would you suggest to overcome the initial doubt and fear that writing a book is too hard?
The best thing I can say is give your here, okay, here's a key thing. And I've talked about this in various conferences, and I talk about it in the book. Ernest Hemingway, very famous author and very successful author of, not 100 years ago, practically now, when he started out. And think whatever you will of Ernest Hemingway, he is machismo and that he killed large animals for sport and all that. The son of a bitch could really write. And one of the things he said, and he was quoted as saying, was, "The first draft of anything is shit." Forgive my vulgar word
Mhm.
there. And I read that and I thought about that and I thought about that. And what did he really mean? I finally figured out what he meant after I had been writing and working on a first draft of a first novel. Beg your pardon. And I realized that what he meant was the first draft of anything must be crap, no, merde, because manure. Because and the idea is that you have to give yourself permission to write something crummy to get to any kind of good stuff. And what you might think of as crummy when you're writing it, like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. Oh God, oh, this is awful. But I'm going to keep writing it. Just keep writing it. Just keep writing it. Just get it down. And you might look back on that and go, well, that's not so bad after all. I think I can maybe work with that. So giving yourself permission to write something that sucks is a really key first step to
Mhm.
breaking through the self-doubt, and
Yeah.
just do it.
Yeah. Getting it
And
down on paper. Right. Yeah,
on
definitely.
screen, on paper, however you do it. Yeah, I find that I do quite a bit of writing by hand, even these days, because I
Mhm.
find that it's like easier. It makes me feel less. I feel such little anxiety when I have a pen and a pad in my hands rather than the keyboard. I don't know. I started out writing professionally as a reporter for a small newspaper way back when. My first real job out of college, a real job, as we say. And I used a typewriter. It was in those days
Mm.
IBM Selectric, and it was sometimes a little bit. I'd look at that typewriter and I'd be a little daunted, but I'd be like, yeah, screw it, man. I've really got to just the deadline's coming up, deadline's tomorrow
Mhm.
night, or deadline's tonight, or deadline's in an hour. Get it done. You can't just sit there and have any angst, because or you're not going to have a job. So that was helpful. But even that sometimes the keyboard makes me just feel a little more inhibited than pen and paper does. And then I
Mhm.
transcribe, onto into a electric file.
Yeah,
That
which
was a little bit of
I
an
know
offshoot.
that process of actually writing down on paper first, like it takes maybe a slightly longer, but it also gives you a chance to look at what you've written when you're transferring it over to the
Yes.
digital format. Look at what you've written, and as you're writing it down on your word processor, you can make necessary changes, edits, whatever else. And yeah, there's
Yes.
just that natural feeling of writing on paper that I also can connect well with. So yeah.
It's yeah, and then just as you're saying, as you're kind of you're working on it as you're inputting it on the keyboard, and so that you wind up having a draft and a half, as I call it.
Hmm.
You know, when it's finally there, it's more cogent, it's more coherent, and you print it out and look at it and go, hey, yeah, okay, no,
Yeah.
what's next?
Yeah, definitely. So your book has a lot of like great techniques, creative flow techniques. Like one that I loved was the Garrett's and the like following the tangents. Don't stop, just keep on following those tangents. And also the storm writing, which I thought was a great idea in as an alternative to brainstorming, right? So what techniques do you use to keep the creative flow going uninterrupted, especially when you feel stuck or unmotivated? Yeah.
Excuse me. As I've gotten older, I find that sometimes it's like kind of cool and freeing to not write for a little while, you know, to give myself permission to just kind of like sit and think about it for a day or longer, you know.
Hmm.
So that's one thing that I'm like, you know, and there are writers out there who are very much focused on word output, on, you know, how many thousands of words per day or per session, and have a very strict publishing schedule. Especially there are a lot of self-publishers out there who publish, you know, several books a year, sometimes even more nowadays. We're all doomed, but we can talk about that later. I don't really mean that, but
Hmm.
anyway, excuse me. So give yourself permission to not put pressure on yourself is one thing. You're going to go at your own pace. Just go at a pace. It's fine if you don't write a whole hell of a lot every day. It's fine.
Hmm.
There will be days when your flow will flow, you know, and you'll surpass what you thought you were going to do, or the most beautiful thing of all, you lose track of time while you're working, and
Hmm.
you look up and go, oh my gosh, you know, I'm due at the dentist in 10 minutes. So, you know, which is like great. You want that. So I always go back to just sitting. To me, what always works is sitting with that pad, you know, yellow pad or whatever I might have, and my pen or pencil. And especially if I really, and I kind of hate to even say I ever feel stuck, because I kind of don't believe in writer's block, you know, but if it's a little bit harder going, I'll use a pencil because
Hmm.
I don't have to worry about like the point drying out or anything. And I'll just start writing about what I think I should be writing. I'll start, let's say, if I know I need a scene where, okay, our heroine is locked up in a box truck by the bad guy, and he's going to come and open the truck and shoot at her to try to solve some of his problems. Excuse me. I know I need that scene. But like, how exactly am I going to start it? Okay, so is she going to talk about being in the truck, and is she about hearing where they're going and trying to figure out that? And, you know, what is she going to try to prepare? She knows that he's very much likely might kill her. She knows she probably ought to prepare, but what will she do? And this is what I will just start writing down, these thoughts about the scene I need, or
Hmm.
thoughts about a character I want to invent.
Hmm.
You
This
know,
is what
this
you
guy.
refer to as storm writing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, where you just start out, yeah, and you prompt yourself with questions. This is part of
Hmm.
the storm writing process.
Yeah.
You keep the questions flowing. How, you know, like I was just saying, how well, where will I start? How will she be feeling? What will she be seeing, hearing, smelling? What, you know, there's going to be a light inside this truck box. Maybe if she bashes it out with her rolling pin because she was doing some catering earlier, then he won't be able to see her, but she could see him because he's going to open the door and the light he'll be backlit. She'll be, I mean, and how then will I represent this from this character's point of view? And so another question, how will I represent it? You know, how long
Yeah.
should this scene be? Okay, well, you know, it could be long, it could be short. It's going to be the length it needs to be.
Yeah.
And just keep going. And fragments are fine. Being fragmentary with the whole thing is fine when you are writing first drafts.
Hmm.
And I think I mentioned this in the book. I was talking about this to a writers conference audience once, years back. It was before I wrote the book, I think. I was talking about this idea, and I had a attendee say, well, yeah, but so we're just supposed to kind of vom out stuff, but it's supposed to make sense at some point. And I go, yeah. And if you just keep doing it, it will. I mean,
Mhm.
unless writing's just really not for you, and you just don't, I mean, but it is, And another thing that, well, in fact, from that same conference, and I can't remember if I mentioned it and you've got a book in you or not, but I relate this little mini anecdote when I was talking to a similar group, talking about it's okay to write stuff that's not good at first.
Mhm.
A woman raised her hand and said, I was in an art class and at one time a drawing class, and the teacher at one point said, if it didn't have to be pretty, what would you draw? And I
Mhm.
thought that was brilliant. I mean, like,
Mhm.
thank you, that exactly. And so as you can see, then these things apply to other areas of life, to other creative areas, to drawing, painting, to making music, to, making decisions about your family life or
Mhm.
what have you. Certainly in one's work life, these things can help. The idea of it doesn't have to be good and perfect at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was reading this book recently, The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, and he's got the same idea in there where it's like, hey, like you have to see your creation all the way through to the ending, otherwise it's just not going to be finished or something like that. It's just like see it all the way through. It doesn't matter whether it's perfect or not, but you get that thing done, and then you can go back and make your edits and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and ring changes on it, or God forbid, even like literally throw it out and start over again, which you can do. And
Mhm.
that's very the getting to the finish line is important. And I would even call it, and I haven't read that book, but um, more of a circle, because there's you and there's your work, and then there is your audience, getting your work to an audience. And I remember talking to an artist who he painted in oils and he also did lithographs. And he said he hates art shows, he hates openings, he hates talking to people who might buy his work. He only likes to do his work. He likes to sit in the studio and do his work
Mhm.
and work with his printer, his lithographer, and watch the printing process and help in the process. Um, so, but he said, but I have to get there. There's no point if it doesn't get out there, if my work doesn't get out there. And he saw it as a as a completion of a circle, and
Mhm.
from you to your audience. And I like that a lot, rather than kind of a linear sort of thing. It
Mhm.
seems more holistic to me.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'm just curious, where's your favorite place? A bit different topic here, but yeah, hopefully very helpful for people listening. Where's your favorite place to write? Because you talked about Garrett's in here, and this I think this right here is like such a useful tool for all writers, finding their Garrett. What is a Garrett, and where's your favorite Garrett?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I talk about the writer's garret. So
Uh-huh.
literally a garret is the place, architecturally, it's the place under the roof,
Mhm.
and above the main ceiling of the main floor. So it's like
Mhm.
the attic, basically, the
Yeah,
garret,
yeah.
and the old cliche of the starving artist who lives in a garret,
Mhm.
or the aspiring little, like you think about Louisa May Alcott or somebody, and Joe March in the in Little Women, doesn't she go to a garret? Somehow she isolates herself away from the um family to get her writing done in private,
Mhm.
and it's secret. So again, so that always captured my imagination. I never had a literal garret in any house I ever lived in, so I couldn't quite test that out. But I thought about garrets, and I thought about okay, so what, I mean, if you have an actual garret, cool, you can go up and make it comfy and put a little rug in, a little lamp, and and
Yeah.
listen to the rain pound and that sort of thing. But okay, what is it about a garret? It's a place of comfort and safety for yourself, for
Mhm.
you and your writing, right? And it might have few distractions. It might be quiet. ideally, or you might be able to hear the traffic outside, or, the family, making dinner or something down below you. But you have this feeling of security and comfort and safety. Again, safety, you're there. No one's looking at what you're doing. No one's observing. No one's doing anything. It's just you and your work. So I thought, well, okay, not definitely, I don't have a literal garret, and most people probably don't. So how can we make our own? Let's make our own garret. How do you, so the point is of course, the characteristics of a garret can be found perhaps anywhere. It can be found perhaps in a carrel in your library, a local library. It can be found at a table in your coffee shop. I've done a lot of writing in a lot of coffee shops over time. I love coffee shops because you can get a coffee and a little treat, maybe a little piece of cake or something, to kind of help you on your way and cheer you on your way as you're working. So that my idea of the portable garret, figure out where you can be. Maybe it is literally somewhere, a corner of your house, or your shed outdoors, or your garage, or your, some public place, a park bench, in some pretty, your car. I mean, the guy that Mark Borchardt, the author of American Movie, I mean, not author, he was this filmmaker who was the subject of a documentary called American Movie. He was this indefatigable guy who had nothing and who would write in his car, and it would be like this cold Minnesota winter, and he's writing his screenplay in his car, and this is not going to be stopped. That was his little garret. So yeah, I like coffee shops a lot. So that, and I also like my office here at home where I'm sitting now. I have my you can see very well my armchair. I have a little armchair there, a little rug, a little lamp,
That's
and
nice.
and I have my radio. I have like to listen to the classical and jazz stations on the radio. So
oh yeah. You and I are like, I like writing at cafes as well. And you mentioned in your book that you can like eavesdrop
yes,
to conversations, and that may inspire your, actually, if you just sit there and listen, like in a public place and you listen. I never really thought about that before, but like that's worth trying, because you get ideas from those people's conversations. I really liked that tip in there. But yeah, just a little bit of a not too noisy environment with the jazz music or whatever playing in the background, with some strangers, and just sitting there with the laptop and just writing. I think that's a great garret to have, but it also depends on the mood as well. Sometimes it's better to be in a quiet place, like you said, in your office, comfortable, no interruptions and all that stuff. So,
You can close the
yeah,
door. A
it's
place where you can close the door is really good. I might add that I read, I don't know if it was after I wrote that You've Got a Book in You, but I read a study about concentration where they found that absolute silence is kind of disturbing, and you're not as good at concentrating, but having some kind of little background, and like a deafening jet engine is not good either, but having like some kind of ambient sound that you don't really have to key into, but that's just sort of like this little blanket around you, a little comfort, is good. And cafes, coffee shops are like that. Like you were just saying, a little bit of conversation here, a little bit, they have their music on, whatever. And that's supposed to be kind of like ideal, that sort of low level ambient sound. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, that's great. So, how do you balance the freedom of following serendipity in your writing with the need for structure and coherence in your book? You mentioned truth, people, and map as well. So, I think this could like relate to this question. Maybe you can touch a bit on that.
Yeah, right. One does need some structure eventually. If you're writing fiction, you have to follow some conventions, as well as nonfiction, certainly as well, whether your nonfiction may be a memoir, or which can be a little bit less rigidly structured, or say a how-to book, something that something you're an expert in. So, we any art is part mysticism, mystical, there's a certain ineffableness. There are things that you can't exactly dissect and lay out on a table and say this is just exactly how. If there were, I suppose everybody would be a famous artist,
Hmm.
or whatever. So one looks within, one looks within for a lot of material, and you look at the world outside of you also for material, eavesdropping in coffee shops for one,
Hmm.
reading a newspaper for another. That dates me, thinking about actual newspapers,
Yeah.
which are really wonderful. We still get one every day here at the house.
Hmm.
Um, and then I really, a lot of authors say this, and I'll say it too, because it's really worthwhile. Having a good foundation as a reader is important. Now, many writers say, and Ray Bradbury, who had very good writing advice for one, he said, well, you got to be a voracious reader. And it's true that you have to like reading, of course, and you have to be able to, read with comprehension. I am a slow reader, as it happens, and so I am not as widely read as some might expect me to be, but I'm fairly deeply read in that I like to
Hmm.
also read books over and over again. A favorite book I'll read multiple times, and I'll be asking myself questions through the whole thing. If I'm reading it just for pleasure, I might not be so asky, but if I'm reading it to learn a little more about that writer's technique and why this book is so successful and why I like it so much, again, whether fiction or nonfiction, I'll be asking questions and maybe taking notes, writing down, some ideas and things I observe. So reading and like by osmosis, by one's internal digestive system,
Hmm.
you learn about structure, you learn about how things are done, how a short story is put together. Read a bunch of short stories and you're going to learn a lot.
Hmm.
So that is helpful to just know a few books really well, know some great books well, and that can help you very much help you structure your own work. I'm against being too rigid in structure, and everybody's going to say that. Every author's going to say, "Oh, rigidity is bad," and also, zero form and structure is bad. So you do have to find your
Hmm.
balance, and it can be different for everyone. I mean, look at Jack Kerouac. Okay, he's a dinosauric example, but this guy blazed a new trail in writing by, you know, by writing on the road on one continuous stream of roll of paper on a typewriter, and sometimes he'd be sitting in somebody's bathroom in some house he's crashing at, continuing to write his story about this road trip.
Hmm.
So, and that became a famous book. That was groundbreaking. Gertrude Stein used very strange structure in her fiction. Now, not that she sold a hell of a lot of copies, but she was a pioneer in the literary movements and the so-called lost generation, the Hemingway times in the 1920s,
Hmm.
and a whole lot of modern work sprang from that bunch at that time. So there you can be somewhat iconoclastic, and then you can just just put it together. It has to make sense to you, and if it makes sense to
Hmm.
you, then that's pretty good. There are all kinds of excuse me, writers, authors, I beg your
Yeah, no problem.
pardon, gurus out there who say, well, you need to have a strong structure, and here's how your structure ought to be, and they give you this diagram or this series of steps that you have to go through, and I always found those rather difficult, rather stultifying, oppressive, perhaps even.
Hmm.
Even the three-act structure I'm not all that big on. I mean, it can work, and it does work great
Hmm.
if you pull it off well. Many humans respond to that three-act structure, beginning, middle, end, and to oversimplify it. But one thing I write about in You've Got a Book in You is what I call the Route 66 placemat map. It's
Hmm.
kind of like making a map for your book. Okay, you know, maybe you can have a list of things that need to happen, whatever. You know, you can, and I remember looking at a placemat in a diner, and it was the Route 66. It had Route 66 on it, on this placemat, and it went from Chicago to Los Angeles, as we may know and remember. And it had little pictures of mountains and little pictures of cowboys and little pictures of, you know, and it was a very, very simple map. And I thought,
Mhm.
you know, literally, you could probably get there by folding this up and putting it in your pocket and setting out. So something, just something that appeals to you, some way to you know, figure out your path. You don't start a novel without having some idea of what it's going to be about. So write it down. You know, you know, I want to write a story about, you know, two women sitting at a table talking, and then something's going to happen. Their daughter's going to walk in, or something. I don't know what, and it's going to go from there. And then there's going to be some guy that comes in, and then there, you know, and eventually, and it's going to end in heartbreak. Okay, you know, or it's going to end with a happy ending. There's going to be a wedding and a baby, whatever. So figure out from what would be a fun way to get from here to there. That's another fun thing. Pick a couple of possibilities and figure out, just start to think, well, you know, how might I get these people from here to there? And what might be a lot of fun to have them do and think and say and encounter along the way. Does that kind of help somewhat, do you think?
Yeah, like it sounds a bit familiar from your book, The Truth, the People, and the Map, which is, I think, what you're referring to right now, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you know, you've got what you want to say and what you want to explore as well,
That's
and then
your
you've got,
truth. Yes.
yeah, and then you got some characters you come up with, your
Those are the
people, you know,
people. Yes.
yeah, and then your map,
Yeah.
how you're going to get them to where you want
Yeah.
them to
Yeah. And this
go.
obviously works for nonfiction as well,
Yes,
right? We
yes.
have to have the truth in the nonfiction. We have to have the
Yes,
people, otherwise it's going to be boring. And we have
right.
to have a direction, right? The map. I
Yes,
really
right,
love this
right.
this tip of yours, as it just gives you directions, but it's not binding. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
tying you
Mm-hmm.
down. It's not too rigid, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no great novel out there that's just like some novel that came before it, you know. So you can't even think, well, maybe I should just kind of copy this. But you know, on the other hand, you can take inspiration from work that's already out there. I remember Chuck Palahniuk, the guy that wrote Fight Club. He said he's on record as saying, "Well, I wanted to write my own version of The Great Gatsby." And I'm like, wow, really? And and Gatsby had the guy that wrote the story down, basically. Nick Carraway is the one that writes the story of Gatsby. And
Uh-huh.
in Fight Club, yeah, I'm blanking on the characters' names. Anyway,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
forget as well.
yeah, the first person guy is the one that writes the story of,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Oh, anyway, sorry, folks, I'm not coming up with
Yes,
those characters'
people
names.
watching and listening probably already know, or they can look it
Yeah, yeah, you're screaming at the screen. It's
up. Yes, yes.
it's on
This.
the tip of my head. Anyway, but that, yeah. So, oh, and one last thing about
Uh-huh.
organizing. I'm a big fan of plain old lists. You
Uh-huh.
know, make a list of stuff you want to have happen in this book or story. You know,
Mhm.
just start there. You know, and things will kind of coagulate and let it sit for a while and come back to it. And you're like, oh yeah, I could. Oh yeah, and if I thought, oh yeah, I could. What if I, you know? And I also
Mhm.
use, to help people develop material, I use the rule of two a lot. Instead of thinking, oh, I need to put my protagonist in a difficult situation. Oh, what should I do? What should I do? Well, think about putting him or her in with two problems. Give them two problems. And I remember I was doing a little teaching in a short story writing class one time, and I talked about this rule of two. You know, just double it, whatever it is, whatever you think you need, double it and see what happens. And the look on this one woman's face as she's sitting in the back row, I can still see her today. She was just,
Mm.
it was this, a bunch of stuff was dawning on her, and all she needed was to give herself permission to not be on one track, but to branch out, you know.
Mhm.
I still
Mhm.
remember that woman. Anyway, so that's a tip that I follow myself all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, yeah. You brought up a couple points that I think are amazing. Like, the author of Fight Club said that he wanted to write Great Gatsby. You have a point in your book where you basically just say steal, but of course make it your own. I love that. What was the example of? I think it was Jane Austen with I can't remember now, but basically
I'm not
you're
either.
taking like a couple characters from a couple different books and then mashing them together, and it's like, well, you
Yeah,
can make it your own. I mean, of course they're going to act differently, and you
yeah,
change their names and just use like some of the same personalities and whatever else.
yeah.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah, and that can
Yeah.
really help if you're feeling stuck, you know, especially in the early stages of, you know, like drafting a story or a novel. It, you know, just like, yeah, think about throwing somebody new in that already exists someplace, but yeah, but they're going to be different. They're going to be how you want them to be, or how you
Mhm.
think they might be in this situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Take whatever. I mean, take Scout Finch and put her in a gutter in Calcutta, and with some bad guy after her, who's not just a well, who's yeah, you can have whatever the hell. Anyway, I don't need to get too, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, or make her be grown up and having a wedding or whatever, and
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with doing that because you're obviously not plagiarizing as long as you're not,
no.
naming the same name and whatever else. Like, it just creates a completely new character and environment, and
Mm-hmm.
it helps your ideas
Mm-hmm.
to flow a lot easier. As you said,
Yeah,
especially when you're
because
stuck,
you're
right?
Yeah, and because you're kind of piggybacking on work another author has done where they've developed a character, let's say, they've really developed that character. And when you really think about one of your favorite characters or some of your favorite characters, why do you like them? What is it about them? If you start writing about that character, let's just say Scout Finch again, or Jem Finch, or Atticus Finch, or whatever the hell, or some other book. How the guy from Gentleman in Moscow, I was just looking at that book again the other day.
I've
The
got
the
it.
Count, the Count, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really, super book.
Mhm.
One key flaw that I saw in it though, as a never mind.
It's okay.
We don't have time for all that.
Yeah.
But of course, I haven't sold a bazillion copies, of anything. I lost track. But yeah, to get into and then you kind of can kind of see the different traits that author pulled together, and you can see more deeply what's going on, and you learn the more you
Mhm.
absorb, the more you learn, and the more you can do on your own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the other point that you brought up, even before this whole stealing ideas, is like reading, and like, if you're a writer, usually you're a reader as well.
right,
I
right.
totally agree with this because um reading and writing kind of go hand in hand. I created a YouTube video about this probably about 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Just um if you want to be a better writer, reading is not going to hurt you. It's going to help you, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Yes, yes. I will say though that I don't read much in the genres that I've written in. I don't read. I'm not that big of a mystery and crime novel fan.
mhm.
I like to read a lot of true crime and true mystery, things like that.
Yeah.
And read more. I tend to read a little bit more literary fiction and more older stuff.
Mhm.
Old books that I haven't gotten to yet, let's say.
Yeah.
But and so because you also kind of don't want to necessarily, well, you don't want to pollute yourself with bad stuff with mediocre writing. And so I always try to read the absolute best I possibly can lay my hands on,
Mhm.
not just, oh yeah, any old beach read, like, no, screw that. So life's
Mhm.
too short.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So as we talked about, like structuring your stories and books and stuff like that, I'm just curious, how do you capture and organize spontaneous ideas? Maybe they pop out of nowhere or whatever. They come to you throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the months, throughout the years.
Hmm.
Um, so how do you usually organize this information or capture this information?
That it's funny that you say that, because I have right here on my desk a piece of paper, and it has this name on it. Can you read it?
Why Wythe? Willie?
W
Willie
Willie
McAllister.
Willie McAllister. This
Yeah.
name came to me. I was overhearing some, I don't know if it was it was a phone conversation
Mm.
in my household here, and somebody said the name something like, was it Millie McAllister or something like, but the name Willie McAllister just like broke upon me as a fabulous character name. I've got to write somebody named Willie McAllister, maybe a bad guy or like a rural cop, or I don't know what, some guy that successfully broke out of prison. I don't know. So I just so anyway, I ran over and wrote down Willie McAllister on this piece of scrap paper, and there it is on my standby, in my little standby pile, and I will
Mhm.
type that into a file that I have on my computer that says names and titles. So I have
Mhm.
names and titles, and then I have little notes by that, and then I just kind of have like one or two master Jigunga files, electronic files, with ideas for stories, plots, plot points, ideas for, if it's for a particular character that I might write further books on, then they'll kind of have their own thing. But it's just really kind of,
Mhm.
that's it. As long as it's down somewhere, because you'll lose it otherwise. As long as
Mhm.
it's down, then I feel okay about it, and I go back and review these, many pages of ideas and stuff, and I'm like, oh God, yeah, I forgot that. Oh my gosh, yeah, that could be something I could try, or
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
So initially
just
you write
that,
it
not
down.
really complicated. Uh,
Initially you write it down on paper or what, a notebook,
Yeah,
or carry
usually
a
I'll make,
notebook around
yeah,
with you, or
yeah, and I always have some index cards and a pen and pencil in my purse, and of course when I'm home I'm near writing materials all the time. So I even have
yeah.
some like a backup in my car. So yeah, you just get the idea down, and then when you go and put it into your electronic file, you can kind of you can develop it maybe a little bit more, and
Like
say, yeah, okay,
categorize
oh,
it,
plus this,
or
plus this.
yeah.
Yeah, you could, and I should do better at categorizing and trying to group things, but I'm not all that good at that at
Mhm.
this point.
As long as you know where it is, that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, and it's all, it's flow. It can be messy. There, being
Yeah.
messy can be good.
So if you've already used a story idea or a character in your files, what do you
Hmm.
do with it then?
Oh well, I mean, if it's there and if it's been developed and used, then I'll just delete it. You know,
Delete it or move it to an archive or something?
oh no, I don't know. I mean, the finished work is the archive, I guess I would say.
I guess so. Yeah, true.
So
All right,
yeah.
cool. That's good. Yeah, keep it simple. Sometimes keeping it simple is the best way to go too. Yeah.
Yep.
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 Cool. So, maybe like one or couple more questions here I've got for you. What
Sure.
strategies do you use to ensure that each chapter begins and ends compellingly, whether it's in a fiction or a nonfiction book, to
Hmm.
keep your readers engaged throughout your book? As I think you stated, some sort of like statistic, it could be different now, but usually when people get into books, if the chapter ends and it doesn't keep them reading, they will most likely not come back to the book, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, of course what you're, ideally you want people to uh be mad at you because they missed their bedtime, and that, and it was 2:30 in the morning by the time they turned the light out, and they were tired at work the next day. So that's what you really always want to shoot for, of course.
Mhm.
One key thing that I learned fairly early on in terms of ending chapters with a bang, let's say, when you come to a bang, end the chapter. That's like, that's the easiest and most, like, it's going to feel the most natural. Yeah, wow, okay, so the car went over the cliff. Okay, end of page, next chapter. Now the sheriff is looking at the wreckage or whatever, or, or the people are in the car screaming, or the angels are looking down and trying to decide what to do with these souls. Whatever. So, you know,
Yeah.
so definitely ending just when you get to a good bang. Okay, that's when to make them turn the page. And then as far as beginning a chapter, you know, you basically want to almost always start with something that's active action. It's almost always compelling to start with a line of dialogue, and you will pretty immediately need to let them know who's talking and what's what's going on. But having some can't you take no for an answer? Well, okay, what's going on there? There's an argument going on. We're in the middle of some kind of argument or something. Who's this talking? Who are they angry at? That's a pretty good way to start a chapter, to start
Yeah.
something. So a way to kind of form a chapter opening would be, okay, what do I need in this chapter? What do I need going forward in the story, whether it's this chapter or the next 10 chapters, a hunk of, what do I need? And so then just pick a good place that seems good to start, and have some action, rather than the day dawned bright and sunny and they were trudging across the landscape, and it took a long time before they got to the town, and then they had to beg for water once they got to the town, and get have the argument with the hotel keeper, or start with them collapsing at the feet of the old woman who's taking her dog to the vet, or whatever the hell,
Mhm. Yeah.
you
Good, good.
know, just some kind of action is always good. You can't go wrong with action. Action or some kind of interesting dialogue.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, like you say, whenever something exciting happens, you end the chapter or whatever. But of course, we have to have a good pacing, right? Um, we
Right.
can't
Yeah,
have
you can't just
action have it happening all the time, obviously.
right. You can't have an explosion every 3 seconds. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And we pretty much innately know this. If you've
Mhm.
done any reading, you know that there's going to be high points and exciting points, and then you need a breather, and your characters need a breather. So that's kind of, they suggest themselves what should be done next. The guy
Uh-huh.
barely jumps onto the train. He's hanging on, and he finally manages to swing up into the boxcar.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so that big action's over, and now he's got to take a breath or two before noticing who's sitting in the corner of that boxcar with him, or
Mhm.
what is in the boxcar with him.
Yeah, yeah.
So that you can kind of just try to be natural and let your characters go about things naturally.
Works for narrative nonfiction as well. Like I read this really great book, Killers of the Flower Moon, last year. Narrative nonfiction by David Gran, of course, based on real life. And like each chapter just, it kept me wanting to read more and more.
Hmm.
Have you ever read that one?
I haven't, and I just wrote that down because I've heard of it. You're the second person that's mentioned it to me recently, so I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna get a hold of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's great
another.
narrative nonfiction. Very good.
Yeah, John Krakauer's books are good also for
Mhm.
that. Into Thin Air,
Mhm.
the one about Everest, and Into the Wild. That was his first one that he got
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of
Uh-huh.
attention for, the Chris McCandless story.
Mhm.
So those are very well done. And with the guy that wrote A Perfect Storm, Sebastian Junger,
Mhm.
right? And he's written other books since then, and that was very good narrative nonfiction. And
Yeah.
there's tons, but yeah, those are some examples that pop into
Mhm.
mind.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another good book that has great pacing and good chapter endings and beginning is um The Trees by Percival Everett. I don't know if you've ever
Oh
read that one.
man, no, I'm gonna jot that
The
one down.
Trees. Yeah.
Okay.
Percival Everett. I think it was mm, what was it? Pulitzer Prize or Booker Prize? I can't remember. Or
Okay,
was it
yeah,
a
yeah.
runner up? I can't quite remember, but that's a really good one. So
Cool, thank you.
any other book recommendations for our audience?
My goodness, well, just so many. I mean, you could just talk, we could talk for hours, but I would say that if you are interested in writing in a particular genre, well, try to seek out the very best books you can in that genre and read them deeply. Read them
Hmm.
once or twice, read them twice,
Hmm.
and read them, kind of read them the first time just to read them, and then the second time go back and start questioning, man, why did my pulse start going right there? When that dog bit that guy, you kind of know when you've got a dog bite in scene one, there's got to be rabies in scene three,
Hmm.
or whatever. Um, so yeah. So read deeply in the genre you're interested in, but and be very choosy. And what else? I forgot the question.
The question was,
What-
do you have any good recommendations that
Oh yeah,
keep the
yeah,
pace like flowing, whether it's a
yeah.
nonfiction or fiction?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot, and we've talked about great books to read. And also, I mean, and how to find great books too. Ask a good librarian, ask
Mhm.
a professor maybe who might be teaching. I don't know, that might be a little dicey, but
Thanks.
ask if I swear to God, and I have been an adjunct professor, so I mean,
Yeah.
and you've taught, you teach.
Yes, I do teach.
God, oh God, I mean, that'd be another subject. Uh, um, Darn it, something was on the top of my about reading, asking trusted people. One really cool thing is, and if you can ever do this, I don't know, but if there's a great house, a great home somewhere that you have access to, and if there's a library in that home, look around in that library.
Oh yes.
Pick a few things
Oh
off the
yes.
shelves. Old books are really good with me. And
Hmm.
so that's, whatever. It's kind of a little bit of an offbeat idea, or
Hmm.
imagine what a great library would have in it. And also, man, going way back to some
Hmm.
classics, way back, Shakespeare,
Hmm.
Homer, I
Yeah.
mean, like, read, the Odyssey, the Iliad, read and read annotated versions of it, so that you know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And read some annotated Shakespeare. I mean, the three greatest Shakespeare tragedies, arguably Lear, Hamlet, and Macbeth. Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, in Macbeth, spoiler alert, the guy goes from being this conquering hero, borne aloft on the shoulders of his countrymen, in the beginning, to his head on a pike from by the same countrymen in 100 pages, and in those 100 pages, that ending is inevitable. It's the
Hmm.
only possible ending, and it's like you just like want to fall on the floor when you read that and you see the progression of scenes and how Shakespeare handled those characters and that story. And it's just, I mean, it's incredible. So there's many lessons to be learned from the great, great old texts out there. And
Hmm.
yes, I mean, we're talking about dead white men and stuff like that, but screw it. They were great authors. And,
Yeah.
I'm a non-dead queer white woman, so I check a few boxes,
Hmm.
it doesn't matter. I can learn from those things. I can learn from, from anything. I can also, you can read a poor book and realize, wow, this is kind of a poor book. Why is it not grabbing me? Why is it poor? Why do I want to
Yeah.
quit after this? I mean, you can learn stuff that way too.
Yeah. Yeah. For
So,
sure. You can learn what not to do from people
yeah.
who did it not so well.
Yeah. Negative examples, they do have some value.
Yep. Good. Well, I loved having you on the show today. Like, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation before we wrap it up?
About the only thing I would possibly add is that as a writer, it is also good if you can say yes to a lot of different experiences in your life. I try to do that, and I'm a little older now. I'm collecting Social Security, and so you can know that I'm in my 60s at least. So,
Hmm.
and of course, my birth date is public. It's on my Wikipedia page, which I hate, but there it is. I can't lie about my age. My mother always lied about it. She lied about her kids' ages, actually. That got her a long way.
Hmm.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm refocusing here. Oh,
Yes.
experiences. So in my own case, within the last month, worked as a circuit marshal at the Detroit Grand Prix that just happened this past weekend. That was really interesting, and I learned, the second year I've done that. I have played in a concert. I play symphonic percussion on the side, and there was a special show in Ann Arbor that I was invited to play in, and it was a retrospective of Victor Herbert's work, who was the father of American operetta. We may be familiar with his musical score from Babes in Toyland, the famous March of the Toys. Anyway, and that was really interesting. And that recording of that is going to be in the Library of Congress. And so I'm like, well, I'm really happy I did that. Music I played will be in the Library of Congress, available for people to listen to. So, so I pursue my music. I pursue these other like odd opportunities that come up. I cut my own lawn. So I golf. I'm in a little women's golf league, and I suck, but I keep trying. So, and as one gets older, it's important to kind of push oneself. The older you get, the more you have to push yourself to get out there into the world. It's very easy to just stay comfortable at home and just, no, I don't want to, I'd rather not. Well, no, tonight we're going to go to a special memorial about D-Day, a memorial patriotic program in our town about that's going on. So getting out there is something that I would say is very fruitful and helpful for a writer. I have a friend who, I was telling him about the Victor Herbert thing, and as it turns out, he's a big Victor Herbert fan who would know. We talked about that. He shared a meaningful story to me about that music. So it's all your life really is kind of your giant compost pile for your work, in a way. So I would say mix it up.
Yeah, experience, and that experience will lead to more experiences and more opportunities to write about those experiences. And
Thoughts, ideas.
Definitely.
Context, juxtapositions, serendipity.
Yeah, serendipity for sure. Cool. So I hope that all the viewers and listeners can pick up a copy of your book or any of your books. You've got a book in you by Elizabeth Sims. Where else can people reach out to you if they want to like ask you a question or like connect with you on social media or anything like that, if you feel comfortable with sharing that?
Yes, my contact information is on my website, which is elizabethsims.com, 1M in Sims. So you can go over there. You can sign up for a free sampler of my work in thanks for joining my email list, which is pretty infrequent. I infrequently send out emails because I infrequently publish new work. So you're not going to get spammed. And nor will your information go anywhere else. So there's that. My email, and you may email me directly. It's I'm esims at elizabethsims.com. That'll get to me.
I can include that in the description as well.
Okay,
so
you can do that, certainly.
Listening.
Certainly. And then social media I suck at, and so I have accounts on a few different, Facebook, Instagram. It's been so long since I posted, but because I really try to work on my work, and I don't engage as much as people say I should on these platforms, but it is what it is. Anyway, but I am on, and my profiles on Facebook are public, so you can find me. I have both a personal one that is public and a more of an authorial one that is also public.
Okay,
so
cool.
That's the story.
I've got to follow those then too. Yes.
For whatever it's worth.
Yeah. Well, we've had a fantastic conversation today. I hope that everyone watching, listening, have also gained insights from you, what you've shared, your stories, your life experiences, your writing tips. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, Matt. I'm honored to have been with you. I've enjoyed this too. I've certainly, gabbed on quite a bit. I guess that was the point. But I
Yeah,
really I appreciate your questions. They were more insightful than I have sometimes received in podcasts like this. So I really appreciate it. You've given some thought to things, and that's very good. So good for you.
great. I've been told that a little bit more than once now, so
Ah,
that means I'm going on the right track.
I say so.
Yes, thank you
I
so
say
much,
so.
Elizabeth. Yeah, yeah.
You're
Good.
welcome.
All right, everyone. So we'll see you in the next episode, and everyone take care.